Thank you, Your Worship. I'll invite down the RCMP officer in charge, Superintendent Wright, as well. So just looking at G1 service category summary for police protection. So just a quick overview. This does include no change, 142 members for police and 55 municipal employee full-time equivalents in support. Great. So big change we know is the 10% or thereabouts labor change in the contract. So our per member cost has gone from approximately 180 and change to just over 200 and change. In terms of changes to other non-labor, we also brought back the temporary cuts in 2020, so there's around 19,000 for meals and travel. What's also included in there is our unionized staff change, so additional costs due to the collective agreement. Both the superintendent and I are available for any questions for G1, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Superintendent.
Yes, so the largest cost driver there obviously is the collective bargaining agreement, which has pushed up the per member cost in a fairly significant and noticeable manner. So I realize that is a significant cost jump in a single year, and over this past year we've realized the significance of that cost imposition, and we've attempted to run a vacancy pattern to try and alleviate some of those costs. While that wasn't realized fully through this last calendar year, by the end of the fiscal year, the majority of that cost differential for this current fiscal year should be absorbed.
Questions? Councillor McConaughey.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hall. Are we able to address D3 at this time also? Are we kind of rolling everything all in together and just kind of seeing where it goes?
Yeah,
Mayor
well,
Hall?
we're being we are being specific about it. So D3, G1, and O1.
Yeah, I wanted to start at D3 if I could, please. I just want to reiterate rather that, or confirm that this report was unanimously requested by Council. We asked administration on December 20 to bring back a report on what would it look like to cut $1 million in police services budget. And what that came back with was losing the downtown safety unit, or the DSU, and the Car60 program, either at risk, if not completely lost. Have I got that right?
Councillor, that would be probably the primary option to achieve that cost reduction, yes.
So question, and so who determined that these programs are the only option, and what other areas and opportunities were explored?
Essentially, the recommendations were from myself with regards to those priorities. So as a police agency within the province of British Columbia, we're bound by the provincial policing standards contained within the Police Act. So we have to provide core services with regards to responding to calls for service and providing certain service levels with regards to types of investigations. So be that domestic violence, sexual assaults, or major crimes, we have to meet benchmarks there. With the increase primarily in population over the last several years, we've seen a significant spike in calls for service, which has strained our frontline resources. When examining where we could cut, really removing frontline responders and serious crime investigators really wasn't an option. We have to maintain our core function, so essentially we have to look at the layers of the onion that are complementary services. Unfortunately, those would be the downtown safety unit and potentially Car60, and at some point, if there were further cuts, our street crew unit that does proactive anti-crime work.
So there's like literally there's like one couch, one cushion. That's the only place to look, and that was it.
I wouldn't say that. We looked at all aspects of the operation, and those were what I'd describe as nice to have, really nice to have services, but not essential for our core function.
I don't know. I just think it's unfortunate that scrapping the DSU and Car60 have been delivered to council as the only options for council consideration. In my opinion, it's not far off from challenging administration to find savings, and Mr. Babich comes back and says, okay, fine, no snow removal on the hard highway. There you go. You want some cuts? That's what it is. And it just doesn't seem, I mean, we're looking, it has just created a lot of fear and chaos in our community. We've seen a couple of different presentations today. We received a letter from downtown Prince George. I attended an online meeting that was hosted by downtown Prince George, and it was a downtown safety check-in with Corporal Chapman, and that was, you know, one of the topics of conversation with folks that were there. And of course, people are rightfully concerned, and they're terrified and they're scared, thinking that City Council has told the police department, save money and scrap the DSU and Car60. And I gotta say, I'm a little bit, I'm stressed by that, because I'm as a city councilor, I'm looking for meaningful dialogue in meaningful areas, because ultimately I'm here at the table representing the citizens and the taxpayers of the city of Prince George. So I have to challenge our partners and all of our user groups to come to the table in a meaningful manner. And it's not just, well, scrap the things that happen to be the most politically charged, hot button topics, issues that are holding our downtown core together with tape, dollar store tape. And I just expected more, I guess, Mayor Hall. Because I take this job seriously, and it's not a joke. I want serious considerations. But move on. So in the report, it also says that there's been an increase in officers the past few years. There's been 7 additional officers funded since 2016, as well as enhancements in the amount of more than $500,000 for overtime for downtown patrols. That's just in the last 2 years. Have I got that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And then on the table is we're going to be later, or right now, discussing at this budget cycle a request for 2 more officers for internal training here at home, which could potentially save some travel costs, and an additional 2 officers for the base creation of a new investigative support team. And then the goal is to grow that to an additional 2 supervisors and another 8 officers for this team over time.
That would be an ideal scenario.
Right.
Very long term, yes.
Thank you. And we're also tonight processing a $2.4 million invoice in RISE as a result of the recent round of bargaining with the federal government. And in the report, it states that now, as it stands, each officer is about $200K all in per officer.
Approximately for, yes, staffing and operational costs, yes.
I mean, look, we need police. We need well-trained, well-equipped police officers and morale is essential, and they do the work that we all need them to do and we don't want to do. But at the same time, it seems like the only thing rising faster than crime is the cost of policing. And I just don't see how this is sustainable. And I am concerned because it's an essential service, but the costs are just getting more and more out of reach. And we're actually looking at another 10 bodies in the near future down the road. So when we go into bargaining with our QP staff, we go, normally it's based on, there's comparisons of comparable communities. So for our indoor-outdoor workers, we go, okay, how much can we bargain for to increase the wages? What's everybody else doing? Kind of keep it in line. Has that ever been done? Have we ever had a comparable about what we're paying at the City of Prince George for policing services in comparison to like-minded communities? You know?
Yeah, I can give you a bit of an example. So as of 2021, RCMP First Class Constable is $102,418. So compared to Delta Police, which is the average throughout the province of British Columbia, they were at $107,928 for a similar constable. So approximately $5,000 per year more than RCMP. City of Prince George pays 90% of that. They get basically 10% paid by the federal government. So the cost for first-class constable for City of Prince George is $92,176. So approximately $15,000 less than a municipal police officer would be on salary.
Thank you, Superintendent. I want to hear input from my council colleagues, but I really would think that it would be important. I'd like to see a report of comparable policing costs, Mayor Hall. City of Prince George, in comparison to other, I don't think it would be difficult to amass all that information. It might just it would take time. And I think it would be important to do it over the last few years, so it's not just COVID as a primary indicator. And then I have one more thing after that, but can I just open that up for discussion at this time, Mayor Hall, let my council colleagues jump in. And before I do that, I just want the media and folks listening to realize that what we did is, as a council unanimously, just to recap, we asked that the budget RCMP, or that the RCMP rather, revisit seriously their budget, take a look, how can you help us, help our community by finding a savings of $1 million. And what came back to us is scrapping the DSU and the Car60 program. I just want to make that crystal clear. So when I talk about a comparison report with peer communities, I just wanted to open that up to my colleagues, if I could, Mayor Hall.
Okay, I've got a queue here, Councillor McConaughey, so we'll see what comments come of it. Councillor Ramsey, followed by Skaken and Frizzell.
Thanks, Your Worship. And thank you, Councillor McConaughey, for making that crystal clear. I appreciate that immensely. You know, in a year where we're faced with a $2.4 million increase to the RCMP budget and not getting extra officers because of a decision that was made without local government consultation, it stings. And I'm quite frankly not willing to rubber stamp a $30 million bill without asking for more information. And that's what this was. This was asking for more information so that we could make an informed decision on supporting that $30 million budget paid for by our taxpayers who support us around this table. When we got the citizen budget results back, it said that they would support, the citizens would support a 5% increase. 2.4 million on 28 million is a 10% increase. So when I put the recommendation forward at FNA, I took the figure, I put it in half and said, let's look at what $1 million reduction was. It wasn't meant to stick it to the police. It wasn't meant, it was really about getting information back so we could make a critical decisions around this table. And it is frustrating to get information back about those, what I consider very essential services in our community being cut. So I did a little bit of extra research. And first I have a question. When the RCMP in Prince George are short-staffed, are the services like the Downtown Safety Unit, Car60, resources for urban First Nation and domestic violence the first to get pulled from?
We attempt to staff with overtime prior to pulling those resources.
Thank you for that. I really want to make sure residents are getting what they pay for. So I did a deep dive into many peer communities, and I'm just going to kind of share what I found. Prince George, we have a budget this year of $30,783,140. We have 142 members. It works out to about 521 members of our population per member. The cost per officer is approximately $216,000 from what I can tell from the budget. Nanaimo, who has a population of 90,000, 20,000 more than us, has only 12 more officers. They have 154 members, but their budget is $28 million, $2 million less than what we're paying. That is a very great comparison, but why is the city of Prince George paying $2 million more than Nanaimo, and they have 12 extra members? That is a concern for me. And so when I went through and I compared to our peer municipalities, I found that on average, PG pays more per officer than our peer municipalities, In our peer municipalities where services are shared with other communities, their costs came in significantly lower. And in communities where they had their own police force, the costs were not a lot higher than what we're paying right now. So for me, when Councillor McConaughey says we need more information, and I say we need more information, I think we need more information, because I'm really uncomfortable with us paying more than our peer municipalities who are getting, quite frankly, more bang for their buck. So I would love for us to have a report back that has more information on a comparison of what we're getting for the $30 million that we're paying, so that we can understand fully why it's so different from our peer municipalities, because I spent hours going through this. I spent hours going through every municipality's budget, and it's not lining up, and that is a concern. The comment about population doesn't track for me, because the research is proving the opposite. Nanaimo has 20,000 additional people in their population count, and they only have 12 extra officers than us. We have the service enhancement on the table tonight that would decrease that gap even further. So, it begs the question, to me, if it's not population, what is driving that cost up? It is what are our file counts and our call counts compared to other municipalities as well? That's information that I want to know, because maybe our call counts and our file counts are significantly higher than our peer municipalities, and that's how they can get away with a lower cost. I want to know that information. So how can we be sure that we're not going to be faced with another bill from the feds like this? How can we make sure that the RCMP costs are sustainable going forward? And how can we make sure that they're fair and equitable to our peer municipalities? I really want to know this information. I don't anticipate that we can get it by Wednesday, but I would like a report back. I'm happy to put a motion on the floor tonight. I know we're not making motions, Mayor Hall, so I could put it on the floor on Wednesday, but I will be pursuing this.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Skaken.
Well, thank you, Worship, and myself and others appreciate the RCMP. The work they do is thankless. What your members have to put up with night and day is, in some cases, is horrific. So, us grilling you, Superintendent Wright, about financial issues, it's nothing against you or your force, and I'm sure you can understand. My concern is the meeting that took place last week with the DBIA. And my understanding was the fear of God was thrown into the members that the downtown safety unit was going and Car60 was going. And after that meeting, boy, did I get calls. And, it's a little bit upsetting, but I mean, the RCMP, they're getting political on this, and that's the way it is. So a couple questions to you, Superintendent Wright. And you mentioned it before too, the first place that members get poached or taken would be the foot patrols in that downtown. So do you have an idea what percentage the downtown patrols that we funded, the downtown unit, what percentage was it fully staffed last year?
Without the statistics in front of me, I'd say approximately 90 to 95%.
Fully staffed?
Yes.
So you didn't have to pull the members off of anywhere else or off of that unit to do other things?
Correct.
Okay, that's good to hear. We've talked about the RCMP not pushing back on, and you said it's under the Police Act. I mean, now we have RCMP members, and I believe they're still doing it, parole checks at night, which takes 2 members. The paying of political keep of prisoners and that's another, downloaded and offloading cost. And, we had you at one of our committee meetings, the Intergovernmental Resolutions Committee meetings earlier this year. And one of the challenges that you had said publicly and in our meeting was that Crown Council wasn't charging people, and it was frustrating. And and I can understand that. But on the other hand, Crown Council, my understanding is one of our local residents, and John Sikowski was presented tonight, wrote Crown Council and asked them what's going on. And I think you understand. And my concern is that. Just reading this letter, and I'm going to read one paragraph and get your response, and I hope Crown Council and the RCMP can work together, because if you read the entirety of this letter, and it's only one side from Crown Council, it doesn't sound like it's really working. So I'm going to read the paragraph. And it says, whatever the superintendent or individual RCMP officers may have communicated to you or your colleagues is unknown to me. This is Regional Crown Counsel in Prince George. But I would have expected that if the police felt strongly that Crown Counsel were inappropriately not approving charges, they would have resorted to the formal appeal process referred to above or communications informally with me. Over the last 2 years, however, I have not been made aware of a single case in which the police have engaged a formal appeal process in the relation to a decision not to approve a prosecution relating to business property or premise in Prince George. And the reason I bring that up is because we even went through our Intergovernmental Resolutions Committee, bringing resolutions to the UBCM, in a sense, trying to get Crown Counsel to do more work. So, you know, I mean, I can really understand the frustration of Crown Counsel if they're getting the impression the RCMP is kind of blaming them for not charging people, and perhaps the process to file an appeal for them not charging someone is onerous. But I just got to get your your clarification, Superintendent, right on that, and if there has been any discussions with Crown Counsel on how you can kind of improve things going forward.
Yeah, absolutely, Councillor. So I agree. I've had discussions with the Regional Crown Counsel you speak of. They're responsible for the northern area. So, you know what, we're both in agreement that the relationship between our offices should be better, could be better, and we've had several conversations on how to attempt to achieve that. So with regards to appeals to charges not approved by Crown Counsel, no, I don't believe we've elevated any to her level. We've elevated them to the local level at the courthouse, so essentially the local region here on numerous occasions, and not met with success. So really, with the severity of those charges, that's really the level we leave it at, whereas if it were a much more severe charge, we would take it all the way to the Regional Crown Counsel. With regards to improving our relationship, I've had some discussions with her about possible changes in process and structure. One of the examples would be a Crown Counsel for charge approval dedicated to the incidents, or with primary responsibility for incidents that occur downtown. So a rock through a window doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you're familiar with the circumstances of the area and the plight of the shop owner who's had his window broken or her window broken 3 times over the last 2 years, that is a significant issue, and there is some public interest there. We were advised by the admin Crown Counsel here at the Prince George Courthouse that wasn't going to be possible. They claim resourcing shortages. I won't get into it. I don't want to throw them under the bus, but several conversations we've had with them and suggestions put forward similar to that have failed to really bring about a desirable result. And I would say our relationship is still quite strained with that office, to be perfectly honest.
And you know, and I appreciate you being real frank about that, because I think it's important that, I mean, obviously you guys are facing frustrations, you know, out on the front lines, but then there's also things going on with the court process and that. So, you know, I'm hoping going forward that things can be streamlined and work better. And I know one of the things I had mentioned and we had talked about last year, and I put a question to you about, I mean, it was open drug use downtown and drug sales, and the fact that a lot of people don't get charged when they're doing that downtown. But I said, what would happen if someone was doing that in Spruce Land Mall or something? And you basically said that they would get charged. So I guess the message is the drug dealers downtown, the drug users, the people lighting the fires and whatever else it is, it's almost as if they have a sense of immunity that nothing is going to happen to them. And they'll sell the stuff and smoke the stuff right on the street corner on a busy day. So I'm not sure, and I'm not saying you go down there and clamp down on everybody, but they just know for the most part that, you know, they're not going to get arrested. And if they do get arrested, they're going to get thrown in jail for the night. And, you know, who knows if they'll make it to court. So I don't know how you tackle that, Your Worship, to, you know, the RCMP, and it's got to be frustrating. But if they sense they can get away with it, you know, they're going to. And, you know, we had a fire again last week across from here, about $40,000 damage, and no one seems to get caught. And one of the things that, you know, and I know it's challenging, but I have suggested before that we have, you know, cameras outside that aren't accessible, but people know they're under surveillance, and those things work. So I just put that out there, and, you know, Mr. Babbage is hearing me, because quite often when there's a crime happen, the first thing the RCMP do is go to a business, ask them if they have any, closed circuit coverage. So I think that might help, but the businesses downtown, they're just at a wit's end, and the homeless issue and all the rest of that. But it's the drug addicted people and their unpredictability that makes everybody feel unsafe, and probably your members as well. So thanks for letting me go on, Your Worship. I appreciate it.
And Councillor, if I could just respond briefly. And I hate to be even more negative, but like you said, someone with a small amount of drugs might spend a night in jail. Unfortunately, in the current circumstances, they'd be released on a piece of paper unless there's other extenuating circumstances, and wouldn't even see that night anymore nowadays. As well, like you said, it is somewhat location specific. We don't have the resources to clean up every drug transaction we see downtown, and that's unfortunate because it is everywhere. It's pervasive. Case in point, I don't believe we've done a news release yet, but today or perhaps tomorrow, we've executed 3, or I'm not sure, it might be 4 search warrants for drug trafficking at the Knights Inn. Since that's been set up as low barrier housing. So that's unfortunate, but it just it demonstrates the pervasiveness of that behavior in that geographic area, unfortunately, and what we're facing.
And I appreciate that. There's roadblocks that are thrown up all the time, and I appreciate you. The message is obviously going to get out that the rest of the folks at the Knights Inn, that it's not safe to do what they're doing there. So, you just have to keep at them. So thank you, Worship. Thank you.
I was going to add before I go to Councillor Scott, because I can't wait to say it. It has a direct impact on the Hyatt Place, a new hotel downtown, Councillor Skaken, that we've needed for years. Has a direct impact, or will have a direct impact, on our new pool that's going to open up this fall. So you hear about those things at the Knights Inn, which originally we were pretty excited about the fact that there was going to be appropriate low barrier housing and supportive housing, and here we are. So, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Superintendent Wright. I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad that I'm not in charge of the RCMP. I think there's so many questions, and further to the comments from my colleagues, I need more information. I need to better understand how to equate A to B. So I take the point that population isn't enough. There has to be more about the composition of the population within a community, and part of that we derive by, the number of calls and the nature of the activities that are going on. In our case, not only within our city boundaries, but in our immediate area, because we know that Prince George RCMP is also involved. So I'm hoping that I'm hoping for some expediency in getting that information to better satisfy this group, but also the rest of the people in the city, about how we allocate resources. And we're responsible for the public purse, so we need to be good stewards of how we go about this. Nobody wants to say no, but we're in a tough time, and we have to come together to get to the best outcome. So let's see what we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe February 7th I'll be delivering an annual report with a few statistics in it. Perhaps not as detailed as you would like in that short time frame. However, since 2018, we've experienced a 14% increase in call volume. So you're right, police to population is only a very rough estimate. However, I would say if you have demographics of a community where you have a certain crime rate and you increase that population by a percentage, it would be a similar demographic you're still dealing with. So, but yeah, a little more information on February 7th for sure.
Okay.
And Your Worship, if I could just clarify, with regards to the Knights Inn, so we did execute some search warrants for drug trafficking, and I don't want to give the wrong impression. So we have been, since that time, dealing with some of our partners there who are running that facility, BC Housing Native Friendship Center, in order to attempt to rectify the situation there. I don't want to say that they were disengaged or anything like that. They're being very,
Oh, no, I appreciate
very
that.
engaged with us.
And, great service provider with Friendship Center, and BC Housing is doing tremendous work. I get that, but yeah. Councillor McConaughey, I'm just going to go past you for a moment and get to the first ones in. So Councillor Kraus, followed by Everett and Frizzell. And
thank you, Worship. We seem to be bouncing all over the place, so I'll do the same. I guess the 5%, I guess I'm struggling with a little bit because I think we had no idea what the people filling the survey at the time, what they were thinking. So it could be no more than 5% because they don't want to spend any more money, or we expect an increase in service. So I guess that's where I'm struggling with that one. And I guess I'm also, Mayor Hall, has there been any anticipated progress on, the federal government reimbursing local government? So I know there's a call all across BC, and probably more than just across BC, probably all across Canada, that the federal government reimbursed community where we weren't involved at all in those negotiations. And so I guess we'll just sort of have to wait and see how that plays out, because it's a justifiable ask. But I think BC is most affected because we have the highest proportion of RCMP serviced communities. So I think it's really important to BC. And I guess in terms of the training officers, I think there was a discussion last year around training officers as well. And I think there was a call for what training to do what, and why aren't the officers coming to us with the training they need? So again, are we duplicating what Depot's doing, or is Depot deficient in their training and sending the officers out to Canada? So I guess just any responses. And I want to say thank you, by the way. Thank you and the officers for everything you do each and every day, because it's rough work. So anyway, any response?
Thank you. Yeah, with response to the training issue. So, members do arrive with a baseline minimum mandatory requirement training. So this would be to train them to a higher level to hopefully avoid violent confrontations, to give them a better skill set with dealing with the local demographic and some groups within the community, to have better interactions, to provide a better level of service. Also to provide some of the ongoing annual training here locally, as opposed to those members going to Chilliwack perhaps. So I know last year there was some interest from council, and the initial response was, if it wasn't for COVID and the budget, there's a lot of support. So I still think it's a lot of value in those positions, and that's why I brought it forward again for a second year. And if not approved, obviously I will read council on that one.
And thank you for that. I guess if it's partially for conflict resolution and our local demographic, I've got to challenge just a little bit that that demographic would exist all across Canada. And the need for conflict resolution should be a baseline training as well. So I guess it's because it's not just what's happened on the street, it's domestic violence, it's all kinds of things. So I'll just put that out there. I think that I don't know how we influence Depot, but maybe we don't. But I think it's, I guess especially with a higher bill, I think there might be a call for local governments across Canada to be saying, okay, we want officers that can do this stuff when they arrive. So thanks.
thank you. Councillor Everett.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. And just want to say at the beginning, I support the RCMP and the work that they do in our community. And when we talk about, and my council colleagues have covered a number of things, but when we talk about the federal government being involved in making this deal, prior to the federal government making the deal, we always used to have the provincial government make the deal first and say, here it is. And you'll recall that, as in previous councils, we had to go back and talk to Minister Bond, who was in charge in that particular time frame. But I think it's important that we get some additional information in this, so we're not just talking about population, we're talking about files and whatever other dynamics that are in place for different communities that are like size or peer groups that we can bump up against. The other thing, and I just want to say this, we are now going to nights in to do that. have we went and done things around St. Vincent de Paul in the same thing, just for my knowledge? And the last point I want to make is for anybody that has a thought process that we should have our own police force in Prince George, I think it's a very ill-advised direction for us to go. Somebody might have run over their foot or something.
Yes, Councillor, in response to your query of St. Vincent de Paul. So, yeah, we've done open-air drug trafficking enforcement both around that area and around 3rd and George, and those problematic areas in the past. Over the last couple of weeks, we haven't specifically because we've been targeting on this location, but yeah, yes, we do.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Councillor Frizzell.
Thank you, Mayor Hall, and thank you to Superintendent Wright. I want to echo the sentiments from councillors you've heard around the table. The appreciation for what you and your team do running the words danger instead of running away from it. That's not what this is about, but it's important to get that sentiment across. There's, as you've heard tonight, right from the very beginning of the meeting, there's tremendous concern with the costs that the new contract is going to force us to bear. And I wanted to build on Councillor Krause's comments that this is the same with municipalities all across Canada. There is real urgent need to protect the sustainability of local policing. The costs for the retroactive pay and the pay moving forward are beating us down. This is untenable. So we have been pushing hard so that the federal government will listen and pay 100% of the costs. And this council passed the motion to send a letter, and thank you for sending that letter, Mayor Hall. Appreciate it. But the federal budget won't be out till March or maybe April, and that's a pretty important moment for municipalities all across Canada. But there is vigorous support with all of our friends across the country on this one. This is important. I wanted to just touch on the Police Act, specifically sections 15 through 17, which is the part about municipalities must provide protection for the citizens. Because I go back to when we were first working on the new police station, and one of the messages was that we were no longer in compliance with the necessities of a modern police station, and if we did not build a new police station, it would be built and the bill would be sent to us, because the Police Act that the province has that we're bound by does require that if the services are not sufficient and deemed so, the province will pay for it and then bill us for it, and we will be required to pay. On operational costs, now I do want to couch that with the fact that I doubt that portion of the Police Act has ever actually been enforced. We're partners. We work together on this. But as far as operations go, there are costs, and if municipalities do not comply with those costs, we can be forced to bear them anyway. It's perhaps one argument, and it's a weak one at that, for a municipal police force, but I agree with Councillor Everett. That is not a path we want to go down. Quite satisfied and delighted with the service provided by RCMP. Now, the comments brought up tonight are well taken. I just wanted to see if you had any feedback, particularly on comparisons with other municipalities and the types of services that Prince George offers. Do different RCMP detachments have to provide different services in different locations?
Yeah, they do. I mean, they tailor kind of what the unique needs of their community are, but there's several generalities you see, like an investigative support team has evolved in pretty much all detachments of our size or larger, really to alleviate that gap between the frontline responders and serious crime in order to keep the frontline responders focused and available to respond in a timely manner, but still allowing for timely progress and thorough investigations of somewhat significant events so they don't get put on the back burner while frontline members are responding to calls while still being responsible. So different municipalities will focus slightly on different services. I think there's a lot of discussion here tonight, not unexpected, with regards to costs. And really, I think if council would like an examination of cost for service, you know what? I won't beat around the bush. Prince George, we all see the crime severity index every year. We're a fairly high crime community, as are many Western and particularly Northern communities. So not a shock. So we do deal with a high volume of calls for service, and I would say we're fairly high on the severity and on many of those calls for service. So it does draw a lot of resources in addition to simple population mathematics. But I think and several municipalities have gone down this road. I think Kelowna, Nanaimo, a few others over the last few years have had consulting firms come in and do an analysis of the volume of calls, type of calls, the resources dedicated to policing, and how they're currently apportioned in different units, and really what kind of strategic plan you would need moving forward for 3, 5, 10 years. And that may be a road that council may want to go down to get some real statistical analysis behind some hard math for every penny spent.
I think that sounds like the road that Councillor Ramsey has suggested is one that's been trod and that we can pursue. I'd be interested in hearing more when you come back in February as well, just like my council colleagues around the table. But I'm not. I was in support of the motion, like everybody else, to get back more information. Not in support of trying to cut back a budget when we're in a year where the federal government has said that the cost of policing will go up, and that's neither the choice of Superintendent Wright, nor of City Council, nor of the federal, nor of the taxpayers. We're stuck with this, and what we can do is push back hard, and we are pushing back hard with the federal government to get those retroactive dollars paid for. Thank you, Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Councillor Frizzell. I'm going to go to Councillor Sampson first, call in, and then back to Councillor McConaughey.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and it's great going near the end. Lots of comments that I don't have to say, but Superintendent Wright, thank you very much. Please pass on along, as my colleagues have said, my appreciation to the members. It's not an easy job, and so just a lot of value there. And so whatever the discussion is, doesn't take away from that appreciation and value. Quick question, actually, following up on a comment Councillor Skaken made. Do you mind elaborating on parole checks? Are these provincial parole checks, federal parolee checks that you guys have to carry out, or both?
Yeah, typically we push back on doing those. We will do them on some higher risk offenders, simply due to the fact that Fed parole doesn't have resources to do those after hours. So if they're violent offenders and there's a public safety risk, it's in our interest to ensure they're complying with their conditions.
Great, thanks very much for that. I guess if it ever becomes a greater push, I'd want to hear about that, and we could do some advocacy on. I mean, we have North District right in town here, and their mandate is a provincial mandate, so we could look at that if that ever became an issue. Trying to jump around, there's a lot of topics on the floor. I guess looking right away at the, Councillor Ramsey mentioned the 5% citizen budget survey. Citizens said 5% would be their interest. Obviously, we're looking at 10%. The unfortunate part is we're looking at 10% with no increase on service. We're looking at 10% of just costs, but not actual an increase on service provided by the RCMP. And that's both a shame for yourself and for us, because the reality is we can't give you an extra 5% to give you 5% greater service for our community as much as we'd like to. It's just not attainable this year, I don't believe, and it's a shame for the citizens who want that service. They're telling us, hey, we're willing to take an extra 5% for RCMP to get that level of service increased, but instead we had a hand-me-down from the federal government of a massive increase without consultation, without support. That is the biggest factor. There was a contract negotiation that took place between the federal government and the RCMP, and we weren't included, and that's not right. We're acting on it. Mayor Hall, I know you did some advocacy work prior. Council asked that you send a letter. We have. But I don't think we wait. I don't think we sit and see what the federal government says. I think we can be leaders. Prince George, we are leaders. among other communities. And so I think we need to continue the advocacy and continue the push, and not wait to see what others do to see if we get the money. We need to push for that 100%. So, Your Worship, I'm not sure if you have comment on how we can take that next step. I'd like to set up some meetings with ministers, maybe bring in MP Doherty, have him at the table and get his say, his opinion on this, and try to have him join the fight. But we need to ensure that this money is brought back to local governments, especially Prince George. Our residents deserve that. And then, once we see that realized return from our federal government, then hopefully we can look at this increase that the citizens are asking for. That's what they're looking at. Car60 and the Downtown Safety Unit are programs that I've advocated for enhancing this term. We've done some work. We're getting pushback from Northern Health on enhancing their side for Car60, which is a total shame. This is an asset to our community. But we need to keep pushing for that, not cut it back. I supported the motion for the $1 million cut simply for information. I made it clear at the time that I was not interested in cutting any service from the RCMP at all. I made it very clear. I said this is strictly for information, and I support that. Councillor Ramsey made the motion for information, so we can look under every rock and stone, which I think is the right thing to do as a councillor. We need to be considering that. But I know that cuts to service for RCMP right now is not the right choice for our community, as we're facing really a whole slate of issues, both crime and health services wise, and mental health, which Car60 directly supports. I think we continue that advocacy, and we need to let Northern Health know that they need to come to the table even more. We just heard loud and clear. This is maybe we can spin this in a positive way. We heard, we took a lot of flack this week for people saying you can't cut Car60 and getting really upset about it. Now let's turn that around and take it to Northern Health and say, look how much this program matters. We need to enhance it. We need to do more. So I think I'll just put that out there, motionless right now. I won't put a motion on the floor, but let's bring the RCMP and Northern Health back to the table, and let's have those conversations again about Car60, because if I remember correct, I put that notice of motion out, it passed, we began negotiations, and it never went anywhere. There's no results, and that's not acceptable. I mean, this is what we're looking for. RCMP came to the table, Northern Health came to the table, and just as quickly turned around and said no thanks, and it's not sticking with me. I'm not digging that. I want to say Councillor Crouse hit it on the head. I look back at my notes. I have my binder from last year here with the training piece. I appreciate the request, and I appreciate where you're going with this, Superintendent Wright. You want to have officers that have the best training here in Prince George because you're the top cop, the guy responsible for these officers providing this level of service. I agree. I want them to have that level of training. I want them to have the best training possible. I just think that it needs to be provided from the top. And so I respect that you're coming to us with that request. We need to continue to work together. We did a little bit of work last year together. Let's do some more. We pay 90% of the bill for fully trained, fully qualified, ready to go officers. And you deserve to have those cops fully trained and qualified, and we deserve that as well. But it deserves to be paid for at the appropriate level, which is not here. We're paying the bill for them to be here, ready to go, fully trained. So I think we can continue to work together on that. The Resolutions Committee, we talk about actually issues just like this even in our last meeting, and we continue to. So let's keep that work going. Let's see. I guess I have one question because I'm talking a lot. My question would be, what's our relationship between the city and the RCMP? What is our ability to request or direct policing or service in our community? Where's that balance? What's the level of relationship, I guess, with we tell you we want more downtown people, we want more of a focus. How do we direct policing, and what's our limit?
Yeah, with regards to kind of policing priorities for the municipality, so I will gauge that from comments from Crown Council, both here and other council meetings, as well monthly meetings with both the mayor and the city manager to make sure that we are on track when addressing the priorities which are expressed to us. Great,
thanks very much for that. I think those conversations obviously are going to continue to evolve, especially after budget, to see where we land with the budget, and then how we address the priorities and start facing some of the or not start, but continue to face the issues that the community is facing with respect to the needs of police enforcement. The question that Councillor Ramsey commented on was cost per member or by community interests me. I'm sure there's, as Councillor Scott said, there's varying factors, but that information would be interesting if at some point you could bring that back, maybe not by the February 7th meeting, but if possible, that would be great. But if not, then soon after. It would be interesting to see if Nanaimo is paying less per member. Why is that? And what can we do? What kind of things can we try to achieve to get our cost per member down in the future, perhaps, or whatever that takes? That would be an interesting thing to undertake. And then lastly, I say this every time we get a chance to talk to you, crime's crime. And I have no interest in penalizing or criminalizing poverty, which has been talked about by some folks who advocate against some of the steps we've taken with respect to bolstering RCMP or bylaw. However, crime is crime, and if you commit a crime, you shouldn't be let go easily. I use the analogy all the time. If I go and smash a window right now, you'll probably arrest me, and there will be consequences. If Joe Blow downtown smashes a window, there's a lot less consequences often because they have a lot less skin in the game, I guess, is really an easy way to put it. That's not acceptable. We need to make life uncomfortable for criminals in Prince George. They're not welcome here, and we need to protect the businesses in our community, and we need to protect those who want to patronize those businesses. People are feeling uncomfortable going downtown. That's not okay. That hurts the business. That hurts our residents. So let's just keep working together to address crime. And crime is crime. I don't care who's committing it. It's a problem. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sampson. Councillor McConaughey.
Thank you very much, Mayor Hall. Thank you for letting me back in, and I look forward to discussing a possible motion with direction with Councillor Ramsey on Wednesday with regards to getting a report. Thank you, Superintendent, for taking some of the heat and questions, but that's what you get paid the big bucks for. So crime and safety is a #1 concern from what I hear in our city. It's my #1 concern in the city.
Mine as well, Councillor.
At the same time, superintendents before you, and I think including yourself, have said before, we can't arrest our way out of this problem, and yet we keep adding more officers, and the cost continues to rise. The population has risen very gently, in my opinion, and I just see no end in sight. I mean it when I say that the cost of policing is rising faster than the crime rate, and I see no end in sight. So that really begs discussion. So I'm hoping maybe that report will bring some of that to light. I think we do each have a responsibility to sharpen our pencil. It is citizens' money that we're spending, so we have to take that seriously. And I hope that when you do come back with your report, that it includes perhaps a plan to work more with Crown. I see the two entities have to work closely together, or we're not going to get anywhere, and we're going to continue to spin our wheels. And so I'm hoping that could be part of your work plan moving forward, because as a councillor, that's what I hear is an issue also. And it's been said by the gentleman on either side of me. Crime is crime, whether a councillor next to me breaks my car window or someone, he should go to prison or should be charged. And so should anybody, regardless of what their, where they live or what they earn. So it's crime and safety is the #1 issue. So thank you. I look forward to more discussion on Wednesday. And after that, also, got to work together on this. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McConaughey. So, Mr. Davian, Superintendent, we've dealt with capital plan expenditure under E1, and I think we've really touched on, other than you wanting to make more comment on the police protection piece and also on the police protection enhancement, if you want to comment on either one of those, gentlemen.
Just regards to the enhancement, I think the training component's been discussed here at length last year and then a fair bit tonight. So with regards to the investigative support team, those two positions, I believe that'll increase the efficiency of us in responding to calls and also conducting investigations and providing a thorough service to victims. Beyond, you know what, I understand financial constraints and resource constraints, so try and come up with somewhat innovative ideas to approach that. Example being the overtime patrols downtown, rather than just throwing 4 bodies at it for 3 times the cost. I think we've been much more efficient, and I have some stats I'll bring back on February 7th to show what the results of that have been. And similar to the investigative support team, those 2 positions, I think you see a bit of an exponential result from essentially putting them in there. And I kind of use the analogy, instead of having one member kind of in building a Model T Ford from start to finish that takes a month, you have everybody do a little piece, and you roll several off the assembly line in a few hours. So essentially the frontline responders continue to do that, and these mid-level investigators take those cases and deal with them in a timely manner, but calls for service don't languish for long periods of time after people have been victimized, and nor do the investigations, because people have specific roles. So rather than coming in here and asking for 4 members, which would equate to 1 per watch, so 1 additional per shift, I think these 2 would be much more efficient. So I've tried to be judicious in that request.
Thank you very much. Councillor Skaken.
Well, thank you, Worship. Just as far as the training with the folks that come out of depot, has the standard lowered for the people coming out of the depot, or have the complexities of the job dealing with mental health and all that increased? What's you want more training for your members, but what is the root cause of the members not having the training that you're comfortable with when they first get on the job?
I wouldn't describe that I'm not comfortable with it, but I think we could do better.
Okay.
But you know what? I think it was Councillor Sampson that basically said, you know what, I'm in charge of Prince George. I would like to have a better product than the bare minimum requirement. I think we could do better for the citizens with a higher level of training, but I do also understand there's a finite amount of money and resources to go around, and council in particular has to choose where that's spent. So specific to your question, no, I would say the job is more complex. Addictions, mental health, there's more people suffering from it out in the street. And I think the public expectations have grown exponentially in how we deal with those situations. And compared to even a few years ago, the expectation for us to find ways to resolve those incidents without using force is much higher nowadays.
Great. And just the North District, they're obviously a resource that you folks have here that can be resourced, I guess, probably on very short notice in certain circumstances compared to other northern communities. So how much of a benefit is to have North District here for, serious crime investigations, I say gang investigations, and things like that, that benefit, the force here in our community?
Yeah, certainly having some units, provincial units here, the Combined Forces Special Enforcement Unit based out of here, obviously that leads them to focus their investigations on things that center around Prince George as the hub for the North. So it is advantageous. Essentially, most of the units out of North District are very specialized, the ones that actually operate out of the office here in Prince George, but that would be the emergency response team, the traffic reconstructionist. So it's very advantageous. We don't wait for several hours for them to arrive when required. They're there very quick, and it greatly assists us in resolving things quickly and efficiently.
Great. So I appreciate that, and I think the public, when they hear that, we have North District we can call on as well, would appreciate it as well. So thank you for letting me get back in.
Councillor Ramsey.
Thanks, Your Worship, and I really appreciate the way the discussion has gone, so thanks everyone for that. I do, agree with my council colleagues on the training, but I do want to address the second enhancement for the ITS officers. I would be interested in seeing this coming forward perhaps next year as an enhancement request. I don't know if it's something I can support this year just because of how tight the budget is. I do have a deep fondness for RCMP officers. My grandfather was a retired RCMP officer, so I don't want this to come across as not support. I do support and the work that the RCMP are doing in our community to keep us safe is such an important thing for us in our community. I do see, perhaps opportunity for this to be considered in a future year. I did also want to say the study that you mentioned, I would perhaps like to see that come forward as an enhancement request as well, because I would love to see how we could perhaps look at doing what other municipalities have done, as you mentioned, and do a deep dive in making sure that our service offerings and all the work that we're doing is very streamlined and getting the best bang for our buck. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Nobody else in the queue, Superintendent. Thank you very much. And we'll deal with the three recommendations on Wednesday evening.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.